Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and welcome back to Who'd Win and Why. And this time we've got Dexter Douglas, aka Freakazoid, going up against Stanley Ipkiss, aka The Mask. Both Dexter and Stanley wound up unleashing insane superpowered toons by complete accident, whose respective levels of toon force are some of the highest you could find. But only one of them can win in a one-on-one battle to the death, and today it's time for me to decide just who that would be. So, who'd win and why? Let's find out! Alright, so first we're going to talk about Freakazoid. Dexter Douglas was a nerdy kid who received the brand new Pinnacle chip for Christmas, the newest product made by Apex Microchips that was supposed to make a computer double in processing speed. Dexter was over the moon to receive his gift, but unfortunately he did not know about the crazy glitch that the chip possessed. By inputting a very specific code into the computer after installing the chip, the computer would give the user incredible superpowers and alter their mind. And wouldn't you know it, Dexter's cat inputted the exact code by accident, and after Dexter entered it, the one and only Freakazoid was born. Freakazoid is a separate entity from Dexter entirely, and he's far more silly and unchained. While Dexter couldn't initially control when he transformed into Freakazoid, he later learned that he could unleash him by saying the words freak out, and similarly Freakazoid would change back into Dexter by saying freak in, which would also send Freakazoid to the Freakazone where he waits to be pulled back into the real world. Eventually, despite his crazy personality, Freakazoid was convinced to use his powers for good, and he became a surprisingly competent, albeit unorthodox, superhero, and he's definitely got the abilities to prove why. Because Freakazoid is a cartoon character, a very wacky and over-the-top one at that, he possesses Toon Force, a nearly unexplainable phenomenon that allows its users to do essentially anything they want on a whim, bypassing any standard laws of physics. There are some cartoon characters who can manipulate Toon Force better than others, and the abilities that it grants can vary from user to user. But whether it's his amazing superpowers or the Toon Force itself, or both, Freakazoid's abilities are astonishing, including his physical stats. Freakazoid's strength has varied from time to time, but on his best days, he's strong enough to damage steel and heavy machinery, launch his opponents through multiple buildings with minimal force, and he's been shown lifting and throwing huge monsters over his head. He's wicked fast too, easily dodging gunfire and various energy beams, not to mention evading electrical attacks from the villain Invisibo, which travel over 280 times faster than sound, assuming their speed is equal to that of natural lightning. Freakazoid can amplify his speed by transforming into his electric form. While in this form, he once traveled from the United States to Tibet to yell at a monk for raking too loudly, effectively traveling halfway around the world in 10 seconds. And sure, he's tough enough to survive some crazy impact forces and bombs and get right back up, but none of that compares to when he endured a hit from an 800 megaton nuclear warhead from point-blank range, which is 16 times more powerful than the largest nuke ever set off in the real world. Of course, there are plenty more feats that Freakazoid has displayed, but these feats showcase some of his greatest moments ever in the cartoon. Though thanks to Toon Force, who knows where his limits definitively lie. Freakazoid's strength, speed, and durability are far from the only things he's got going for him, made very evident by his other superpowers. He can use his flight and teleportation abilities to stay one step ahead of his opponent, and he can shapeshift his body in many different ways, like stretching an arm, growing in size, and unzipping his head. His mental powers like telekinesis and weather manipulation can also come in handy from time to time. Freakazoid can even see the audience and will sometimes speak directly to them, effectively breaking the fourth wall, and he can alter the laws of physics to straight up do impossible things, acting against the laws of the universe. And despite what you might think at first glance, Freakazoid isn't coming in empty-handed, and that's all thanks to the power of hammer space, or some of you may know it as the magic satchel technique. This trait is almost synonymous with Toon Force itself, and with it, Freakazoid can pull almost anything he can imagine out of literally nowhere and use it for combat, or whatever else he's doing. From scissors to hammers, from a glass of water to a time bomb, there's no telling what he'll decide to just bring into existence, and he's bound to get creative. This is because Freakazoid's mind actually possesses all the information found across the whole internet, simply as a side effect of his creation. The internet holds dozens upon dozens of zettabytes of data today, a zettabyte being 1 sextillion bytes, and with the net collecting more and more every day, Freakazoid will keep updating and getting smarter each and every second. But unfortunately, this constant and overwhelming flow of information has made him pretty much insane at this point, if it wasn't obvious enough. Freakazoid is very much the definition of a loose cannon, but that doesn't make him unbeatable. He is specifically weak to graphite bars charged with negative ions, basically acting as his kryptonite. And while this may not be easy to exploit, just as Dexter unleashes Freakazoid by saying freak out, saying freak in will change him back into Dexter, obviously becoming far more vulnerable. However, Freakazoid's naturally silly and unpredictable nature makes him a much more formidable opponent than how he might appear. With Toon Force for superpowers and the internet for a brain, it's hard to compete with Dexter Douglas's most powerful creation when he freaks out. Alright, so now it's time to move over to the mask. Stanley Ipkiss was your average dorky banker from Edge City. For most people, not worth a second look. But everything changed when he unknowingly purchased what was likely the most dangerous artifact in the world, a mask found in a local antique shop. This mask possesses an unknown origin. Some say it was the creation of the Norse god Loki, others say it was a part of an African tribal ritual many years ago. But regardless of its past, we know for sure that it's powerful and very, very corrupting. Stanley bought the mask to give to his girlfriend Kathy in an attempt to get their relationship back on track, but when he touched the mask later that evening, the mask attached itself to him and possessed him, drastically changing his mind and body. This is because the mask itself is sentient and requires a human host to merge with in order to unleash its power and cause chaos, the one thing that it desires most. It changed mild-mannered Stanley into nothing short of a cartoonish killing machine, and after he caught the attention of the media, he became known as Big Head, because fun fact, he wasn't addressed as the mask until after the movie and TV show had come out. There have been over 30 wearers of the mask over the course of the comics, but today we'll be focusing on Stanley, the most popular wearer, and primarily what he's been able to pull off. And boy is he a monster when he lets loose. While the mask doesn't reside in a cartoon universe, he is for all intents and purposes a cartoon character, and his level of Toon Force power is absolutely off the charts. And when you have crazy cartoon physics interacting with the normal grounded world, you know that you're in for some wild displays across the mask's adventures. The mask is superhumanly strong and can lift more weight and exert more force than even certain super strong superheroes. He's capable of tossing around vaults and picking up cars like they're footballs, and he can knock over buildings that weigh over 1,000 tons almost effortlessly. He's hit a man with a hammer so hard that he got sent into the ground and whacked a baseball so hard it caught on fire. Speaking of which, the mask has run so fast that the ground beneath him intensely burnt up, putting his running speed well past the hypersonic range, over 10 times the speed of sound. But his reaction speed is even greater than that, as he once raced Lobo around the whole world multiple times in less than half a minute. Now, to be clear, the mask himself was not actually running this quickly, as both he and Lobo were racing in fast-moving vehicles, but this does mean that the mask can react at speeds of around Mach 28,000, and at the end of the race, he and Lobo collided and created an explosion that looked gigantic even from orbit, which they both survived. This honestly isn't very shocking considering that the mask tanks overwhelming amounts of punishment day after day with literally no problem, due not only to his durability, but also due to his regeneration, which is instant and can heal or regrow anything that's been damaged or destroyed. It's not even really a healing factor, more like a Control-Z for attacks. And if you think all that's crazy, just wait until you see what else he can do. It's not a stretch to say that the mask is as versatile of a toon as one could be, and that's really saying something. The mask can use the magic satchel technique to pull practically anything he wants out of thin air, and this is usually done to give him more ammunition and weapons whenever he wants. He's materialized guns, explosives, flamethrowers, anvils, vehicles, baseball bats, battle axes, lamps, and way more, allowing him to bring all the destruction. But alongside his toys, the mask has an untold number of powers and abilities. With the power of shapeshifting, he can change his appearance at will, stretch any or all parts of his body to any length, and he can alter his overall size for growing or shrinking. His fourth wall breaking is obviously extremely prominent in his power set, and of course he can warp the laws of physics with almost no limit. And with this, he can do basically whatever he wants. He's got metamorphosis, duplication, teleportation, telekinesis, mind reading, flight, summoning, power mimicry, and the list just goes on and on. But what might be the most impressive aspect of the mask's Toon Force is his ability to choose how the world reacts to it. Most other cartoons' Toon Force interacts with other people safely, like allowing them to survive something that they definitely should not have survived, altering the laws of physics for them just as much as they do for themselves, and we've seen the Mask do this, but we've also seen him do the opposite, whereas Toon Force interacts with the normal, untouched physics of the real world, and as you can imagine, that leads to terrifyingly bloody results more times than not. And while he could be outsmarted thanks to his insanity, the Mask has also done his fair share of trickery himself, though straightforward murder is still undoubtedly his forte. While the Mask has overcome practically every obstacle put in front of him, the Mask is the mask that Stanley wears, so if it's removed, all that power is suddenly gone. Thankfully, the mask can only be removed if the wearer has decided to let it go, though that hasn't stopped certain people from tricking or guilting their way into getting it off. But at the end of the day, the Mask is a true representation of a cartoon maniac existing in the real world, and he shows just how terrifying that can be. He's not the most mentally stable at all, but when you mix that with seemingly immeasurable cartoon power, you get one of the deadliest characters you could ever imagine, especially when he's smoking. Alright, so now that I've gone over both of these characters, it's finally time for me to say who I think would win this battle. And I gotta say, there were a couple things I found when analyzing this fight that were definitely surprising to say the least. And with characters as wacky and as unpredictable as these guys, it can be hard to gauge what you're getting yourself into when pinning them against each other. However, after looking at all of their accomplishments across the board, I do personally believe that the Mask would be the winner of this fight. And if you think that Freakazoid would win, that's great, that's totally fine, let me know why down in the comments below, but first, here's my reasoning for why I think the Mask would win more often than not. If it isn't obvious already, these characters are insanely tough to set limitations for because of their Toon Force power. You can make the argument that both of them should be capable of theoretically anything they want, and thus the fight couldn't really go anywhere. So to acquire any solid answer, it's important to put a heavy emphasis on their best feats, as that's one of the most reliable ways to establish any kinds of limits. And when doing this, this fight is actually a bit closer than you might expect, simply because they each have their own extreme advantages over each other. For example, both Freakazoid and the Mask possess insanity as a side effect of their great power, but Freakazoid definitely has the overall intelligence advantage as he has the knowledge of the entirety of the internet, which would also naturally give him the rundown on who the Mask is and what his abilities and weaknesses are. Additionally, Freakazoid running to the other end of the planet in 10 seconds shows that he can move and think at speeds of nearly 4.5 million miles per hour, well over 500 times greater than the Mask's travel speed, at least in terms of what he's displayed. But while Freakazoid may hold an edge in those fields, the Mask is superior in every other physical way. Both can be incredibly cartoonishly destructive when they get serious, and Freakazoid has been shown lifting and throwing monsters many times his size. But even giving him a generous strength level of around 10 to 15 tons is leagues below the Mask pushing around 1,000 plus ton buildings like it's nothing. And while Freakazoid may travel faster, the Mask's reaction speed as shown when he raced Lobo around the world is at least 5 times quicker than Freakazoid's travel speed and 100 times faster than his reactionary feats. And he could theoretically summon his vehicle he used to race Lobo to travel that fast as well. And as for durability, the explosion that the Mask and Lobo created after colliding into each other during their race must have equaled around 320 teratons of TNT, which is 400,000 times greater than the 800 megaton nuke Freakazoid survived. So their advantages over each other are clear enough when looking at their feats, but the Mask's better strength, reaction speed, and durability would give him a well-established edge in an up-close fight. But of course, all this number mumbo-jumbo could just as easily be interpreted as meaningless. Because of Toon Force, both Freakazoid and the Mask are arguably designed to be able to survive anything, move as fast as they want to, and hit as hard as they need to, whether it be by their own natural strength or by pulling whatever explosive or weapon they want out of nowhere. So by this standard, you really have to look at who's the better manipulator of Toon Force, which can be judged by a number of factors, including their abilities and the consistency of those abilities. And at first glance, you can see that they share a good amount of powers, like fourth wall breaking, shape-shifting, size-changing, flight, teleportation, telekinesis, the magic satchel technique, and physics warping, and there are even a couple of powers that only Freakazoid has shown the use of, like transforming into electricity and weather manipulation. But not only can the Mask use his Toon Force to replicate powers and abilities of his opponents, rendering any of Freakazoid's extra traits moot, his arsenal is also just much wider and much more powerful. The Mask's duplication, regeneration, metamorphosis, summoning, mind reading, and more prove that he's shown off significantly more versatility. And while it's possible that Freakazoid might be able to do some of these as well, because, you know, it's Toon Force, the Mask at very least has shown greater applications with his power. power. Even when it comes to the abilities that they definitively have in common, the mask generally tends to take them to further extremes, including creating a wider array of deadlier equipment out of nowhere and shapeshifting more drastically and consistently, not to mention increasing his physical capabilities to greater degrees as we previously discussed. But perhaps most importantly, the mask possesses complete control over how his Toon Force interacts with the people in his vicinity, as he can either allow the Toon Force to safely affect them like most cartoons do, or make it just as deadly as if it was operating under normal laws of physics. Granted, he's never used this on another Toon Force user, but the fact that he's the only one of the two that can decide exactly how his reality warping powers affect others, and what happens to them, means that he could potentially counter a lot of Freakazoid's abilities, and it might be one of the best ways to get past his crazy cartoon durability. And to top it off, while Freakazoid may know the mask's weaknesses right off the bat, the mask's mind reading can just as easily uncover Freakazoid's as well, and pulling negatively charged graphite bars into existence is obviously much easier than tricking Stanley into willingly giving up his power. Overall, both of these characters are cartoon powerhouses and are just insane to the max, but any way you slice it, there's no way to mask the gaps between them. Whether it's the quantity of abilities or the quality, Freakazoid doesn't have much that compares to the mask's supreme cartoon physics and absurd overall stats. Freakazoid may have intelligence and speed on his side, but I feel that the mask's superior strength, durability, and combat speed, combined with the greater power, control, and versatility of his Toon Force, would ultimately triumph after all the cartoon violence. So, in my opinion, the winner is the mask. So guys, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please give this video a huge like. I always appreciate the likes. You can leave your comments down in the comments below. Subscribe if you could too, that'd be amazing. If you want to see more who, when, and why, you can click the box on the right. Or if you want to see more what the channel has in store, you can click the box on the left. But no matter what you guys do, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And next time on Who, When, and Why, the Season 11 finale, we've got Bizarro versus Cyborg Superman versus Ultraman versus Superboy Prime. See you all then.